Hello and welcome to the kitchen table. It's Wednesday and we are gathering again across the airwaves just to connect with one another. It's really good that you can gather with us. My name's Alison, I'm the team vicar in Melksham Team Ministry. I was pondering over what to think about for today. It's been a mixed day today. I've taken a funeral of a dear friend of mine, Ted Knight, who is one of the congregation members at my church, and it's always sad to say goodbye to someone that you know and you are so fond of. In these circumstances, it's even harder. And a few of his family gathered at the crematorium, and we said goodbye to Ted with much love and a celebration, knowing that we will celebrate later when we can gather together with all of us there. So today has been a day of strange things going on, really. And as I was preparing to settle down and think about today's talk, I changed my mind completely. I had one of those moments. In our downstairs loo, yes, because do have them, there is a postcard up on the wall. We've got several postcards on the wall, and one of them is, I can't decide whether to be a good example or a horrible warning. And as I read that, I just smiled and I thought, we put that postcard up there because it's very much how Derek lives his life. He's just a bit on the naughty side sometimes. He often needs a t-shirt that says the views of myself don't naturally reflect those of my wife or the vicar. But anyway, he often has that sort of sense of, am I a good example or a horrible warning? He used to be a youth worker. He's a hairy biker with piercings and tattoos and doesn't look like your archetypal vicar's wife, which is how he describes himself. And yet in that notion, sometimes he challenges people to think outside the box, to think differently. He's a youth worker by profession and for many years has worked with children who are really on the edge of society, people who maybe have failed to have had good role models in the past. And Derek comes in and does what Derek does. And it's always been really effective. I thought about myself and my ministry. Am I a good example or a horrible warning? And then I thought about Jesus. Was Jesus a good example or a horrible warning? And for those around him, it must have been really, really difficult. The Pharisees, the people who were in the temples, in the know, the wise people who ought to be listened to, were really challenged by the way Jesus came into the world and tipped their world upside down, questioning the way they did things, questioning the motivation of their hearts. Were they following the letter of the law, or were they following the law of God, the God who loves and wants to change and transform people? Jesus, I think, was absolutely in that same place of not knowing whether to be a good example or a horrible warning. They must have looked at how he was behaving and thrown their arms up in absolute despair. And yet he was teaching something different, something deeper, something real. We're living in such strange times with the COVID virus, with lockdown, with everything that we're experiencing. It's very different. It's not so much a stormy weather as an ice age, a real change, a shift in how we look at the world, how we will act in the world, and how, as we come through it, what will be different. I think church will be different. I don't imagine that church will ever be as it was before 2020. In many ways, I hope not, because I think that we have broken through the doors of church into the airwaves and into society in a different way. We are listening more, responding more, part of the wider community in a way that perhaps we haven't been for a very long time. So for all of us, we have to wear a new cloak, if you like. We have to understand who we are in this new phase of being. Lots of you out there have had to learn how to be teachers in the home. Not teachers only of education, but teachers of the faith too. And I know from talking to several mums across the chat of text messages that it's been really helpful to think about how you tell the story of faith to your children in your home. It's not just about reading scripture, it's about living a life of faith and modelling and showing. And it's been really interesting to see how the children from school have been doing the most amazing worship as part of their school learning. The church schools have laid down that challenge and children have been leading worship across the airwaves, and it has been incredible, moving, thoughtful, thought-provoking. And as always, we learn from the children so much. In our own adult situation, many of us will never have perhaps taken the time to sit and read scripture. We might hear it if we go to church on a Sunday. We might be moved by it. We might be exploring what that means, but we read it in the chunks as given to us in our lectionary, which is a really well thought out, planned way of reading the Bible. But if you've never read the Bible, it's full of so many different things. It's got everything you could imagine. There's adventure, there's murder, there's adultery, there's love. Everything is in the Bible. It's like having a whole library in one book. And as you read it, and it unfurls the story of God's care for the world, his sadness over the world, his solution to us in the sense of Jesus coming into the world, as you get involved with all of those things and you read it in the context of God's divinity and humanity's brokenness, it is an incredible read. It's full of good examples and horrible warnings. So I encourage you today to maybe pick up a Bible, maybe get it online, download it so you get an audio version. If you've never listened to it, then stick it on and listen to those stories. Some of them are just mind-blowing and incredible. Listen to them, work through it. And when they touch your heart and when they pique your interest, then decide whether Jesus is that good example or that horrible warning, and I think you'll find the good example. But the good example is there using different ways to make us wake up, to see how things really are. Just as much now in our new context, when we are learning how to cope with change, how to decide how we live our lives, whether we maintain the community that we are now building and seeing for the first time in several generations, whether we are going back to the caring and giving aspect of generosity and philanthropy that we seem to have lost over the last few generations. So as we think about those things, as we examine in our own hearts how we are and how we are going to live, I would invite you not just to maybe read or listen to the scripture and let it fall upon you and waken up in you a whole new sense of purpose and desire. But as we are starting to come out of this time of lockdown, as we gradually take tiny steps out into our community, several people I've spoken to have said I think I'm going to be really afraid to get close to people, to get rid of that sense of fear that I carry with me. And I would encourage you to allow that sense of community and love and togetherness be the thing that will take away the fear when it's the right time to lose the protection of the fear, because that's what it's doing for us at the moment. It's keeping us safe. But for us to flourish as human beings again, we'll need to go beyond that into the care, into the being able to reach out to one another, connect completely with one another, and maybe to be the good examples that will show the way, that will be the ones that have open hearts and are ready to engage with the world in a brave new way, whether it's continuing over the airwaves, whether it's opening church doors, whether it's doing church differently, whether it's living life more fully, more engaged and more deeply than we've had the courage to maybe for quite a while. I hope and pray that each of us will find our way, that we'll listen to Jesus, who I think has got the most amazing ability to be a fantastic example, but he sometimes does it by being a warning, warning us what to avoid, warning us where the pitfalls are, showing us the straight road. So don't forget, if you want to gather and pray together over Zoom, we can be doing that on Mondays and Saturdays. If you're interested, call Katie Minshall or call me and let us know. In the meantime, stay safe, love one another, and don't forget to read that amazingly exciting book. And if you need a chat, do call on any of the numbers. God bless. See you tomorrow night. Bye bye.